Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm creating a master study of one of my favorite paintings, The Sacred Heart of Jesus by Batoni. I've wanted to do a master study for quite some time now, and later in the video I'll explain why I chose this particular painting, so stay tuned for that. Lately I've been spending a lot of time learning about color theory, which you've probably already noticed if you've been watching my shorts videos. One thing I find really fascinating about master studies is that they allow you to learn directly from another artist. You get a glimpse into how they see color, how they build up values, and what color choices they make throughout a painting. Before jumping into the final piece, I wanted to spend some time preparing. I pulled out my sketchbook and started making a few studies. My main focus was the face, which turned out to be much more difficult than I expected. Part of that was because I didn't have the highest quality reference image, but honestly, trying to copy another artist's style is a little bit like trying to copy someone else's handwriting. You can get close, but it will never be exactly the same. After the first few sketches, I was getting a little frustrated and started thinking that this project might be harder than I originally expected. Then I decided to stop worrying so much about copying every little detail and simply draw the face the way I normally would, while using the original painting as a guide. As soon as I did that, everything started to come together and that final sketch turned out much better. I also spent some time testing colors in my sketchbook. I imported the reference image into the app Sketchbook on my phone and used the color picker tool to get a better understanding of the colors that were actually present in the painting. Then I tried mixing similar colors with my watercolors to see how close I could get. Once I had a clearer idea of how I wanted to approach the painting, I felt ready to get started. That last sketch gave me the confidence I needed. My goal with this project wasn't just to recreate a painting, but to learn from it, practice new skills, and of course, honor Jesus through my artwork. And while doing that, I didn't mind bringing a little bit of my own artistic style into the piece as well. Before I tell you why I chose this painting, which is actually a bit of a longer story, I wanted to quickly talk about the materials I used and how I prepared for the painting process. For this painting, I used Arches hot-pressed watercolor paper, which is my favorite paper to paint on. You can really feel the difference when you're working on high-quality paper, especially when painting portraits. I chose the hot press version because I wanted smooth blends and soft transitions without too much paper texture showing through. For the painting itself, I used my Da Vinci round brushes and Schminke Horadam watercolors. It was definitely time to bring out all the fancy art supplies for this one. Before I started painting, I wet the paper on both sides and let it dry completely. Ever since I started preparing my paper this way, I've noticed a huge difference in how smoothly the paint behaves and how clean the final result looks. Once the paper was dry, I taped it onto a clipboard and applied masking fluid on the areas where the rays of light would be. Later on, I'll be painting those sections with some beautiful shimmering glitter watercolor paints. Now that everything was prepared, it was finally time to start painting. But before we continue, let me tell you why this particular image means so much to me. I was born and raised in Germany, but both of my parents are from Sicily. Because of that, we spend every summer holiday at my grandmother's house in Sicily, and it's a place that is still very important to me. Hanging in the hallway of the house is a large copy of the Sacred Heart image. As long as I can remember, that painting has been there quietly watching over generations of our family. And for some reason I always felt a strong connection to it. There have been a few moments in my life that I still think about when I look at this image. As a child, I once fell down the stairs and somehow ended up right in front of the painting without even a scratch. Years later, there was a house fire, and I found myself stuck in that same hallway surrounded by thick smoke and couldn't see or breathe at all. Thankfully, I made it out safely. There have been other moments as well, and whether someone sees them as coincidences or something more, they have always stayed with me. I know Jesus protected me, and He still does. When I was a teenager, I gradually drifted away from my faith. For many years, I didn't really practice it and felt disconnected from it. At the same time, I spent over a decade struggling with panic attacks and depression. Then, in November of last year, I found my way back to God. Since then, I've experienced a sense of peace that I honestly had never felt before. Everyone's journey is different, but for me, that has been life changing. Over the last few months, I found myself thinking about this particular image again and again. I even bought a Sacred Heart necklace, and back in May, I told my mother that when we return to Sicily this summer, I want to find a small copy of this image to hang up in my room. Then, just a few days later, I discovered that the month of June is traditionally dedicated to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. At that point, everything seemed to come together and I knew exactly what to do. I had already been wanting to try a master study for quite some time, and suddenly I knew exactly which painting I wanted to choose. Well, God works in mysterious ways. Of course, I had my doubts. I worried that I wouldn't be able to do the image justice, or that the final result wouldn't turn out the way I hoped. But this time I decided to not listen to those fears and just go for it. This is something that I've learned over the past couple of months as well. Sometimes life has a way of connecting things at exactly the right moment, and for me, this project felt a little bit like that. One thing that really surprised me while working on this painting was how calm and patient I felt throughout the entire process. Normally, I'm someone who always wants to move forward quickly. I get excited about new ideas and often can't wait to finish one project so I can start the next. But with this painting, something felt different. I wasn't in a hurry at all. I took my time, worked slowly, and genuinely enjoyed every stage of the process. It also reminded me of something I've been learning recently. When it comes to art, the most important part isn't necessarily the finished piece, it's the process itself. The experimenting, the learning, the problem solving, and all those quiet moments spent creating. This painting took me several days to complete, but every hour felt worthwhile. I especially enjoyed working on the face and watching it slowly come to life, layer after layer. As you can probably see, this piece required a lot of layers in almost every area of the painting. The skin, the clothing, the background, and especially the face all developed gradually over time. I'm also very glad that I decided to use my Schminke Horadam watercolors for this. They're incredibly smooth, highly pigmented, and a pleasure to work with. Having materials that you truly enjoy using makes such a big difference. Instead of fighting with your supplies, you can focus entirely on the creative process, and that makes the whole experience so much more enjoyable. By the time I reached the final layers, I could finally see everything starting to come together, and that was one of the most rewarding parts of the entire painting. By the time I finished the watercolor stage, I was already very happy with how the painting looked. Honestly, it felt almost finished at that point, so there wasn't much left to do with colored pencils. Since I had already used all my favorite materials for this project, I decided to bring out my Caran d'Ache Luminance colored pencils as well. Not just because they're fancy, but because their color palette was absolutely perfect for this painting and allowed me to make a few subtle adjustments without overpowering the watercolor underneath. I also added the highlights in the eyes using white Winsor & Newton designer gouache, which helped bring a little extra life and brightness to the portrait. Overall, the colored pencil stage was relatively quick. Most of the work had already been done with the watercolor layers, so I was mainly refining small details and making a few areas stand out a little more. One thing I've learned over the years is that there comes a point where a painting is asking you to stop. Of course, you can always keep adding more details, more layers, and more adjustments, but sometimes adding more doesn't make a painting better. In fact, it can take away from what was already working. At some point, you simply have to trust what you've created, put the pencils down, and call it finished. For this painting, that moment came much sooner than I expected, and I think that was probably a good sign. For the final step, I painted the rays of light and the halo using fine-tech pearlescent watercolors. To be completely honest, this is probably the one part of the painting I'm not entirely satisfied with. Looking back, I think a very light and transparent wash of maybe ochre might have worked better, but that's okay. I still like the effect, and when you look at the painting from different angles, the shimmer catches the light beautifully. Overall, I learned so much from this project. It was a wonderful opportunity to study a painting that means a lot to me, improve my skills, and spend time creating something with a deeper personal meaning. After a few months of feeling somewhat uninspired, This painting helped me find my creative flow again, and for that alone I'm very grateful. I also felt that it was a meaningful way to honor both the month of the Sacred Heart and of course Jesus through my artwork. I hope you enjoyed spending some time painting with me today and maybe even found a little inspiration for your own creative journey. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys.